This is the podcast, It's Not Easy Being Green, and this is episode 2, part 1. How did New York become a state of mandates and have unrealistic climate goals? Since this is a lengthy topic, we'll be dividing into 2 separate recordings, part 1 and part 2. As mentioned from our first episode, we are filming from Mahopac, New York. I'm your host, Dominique, and we have our subject matter expert researcher, Christine, and behind our production, our producer-director is Eddy. I'm going to do a quick recap of our first episode. We spoke about the proposal for the Mahopac Lithium battery facility, its location, the vulnerable wildlife that will be affected, the definite water contamination that would occur since Mahopac's water directly impacts the watershed of New York City, the phenomenon of thermal runaway, and the highly toxic chemicals that are released during the explosion of a battery storage facility and the acute health effects. And we also discussed about the 30-plus schools, daycares, senior centers, etc. that are within 5 miles of the site.
And we'll be posting a map so you can see that 5-mile radius and who would be affected by it.
We also spoke about the present New York State Senator for District 40, Peter Harcum, that also happens to be the chair of the Senate Environmental Conservation Committee and had authored a bill, S-7834, that would eliminate home rules. And the major reason why the bill was stricken down was because Harcum happens to be up for re-election this year, and many of his constituents were very infuriated. So he actually refused to say his opponent's name, but I'll say her name again, Gina Arena. And lastly, of huge importance, Christine revealed that hydrogen fluoride, a highly toxic chemical that is actually released during lithium battery fires, had been omitted from being tested by Governor Hochul's task force that had been charged with investigating the best fires for 2023. Okay, so that brings us to our second episode, How did New York become a state of mandates and have unrealistic climate goals? So to address this topic, we're going to have to travel back in time, specifically 2006, when a documentary by filmmaker Davis Guggenheim came out called An Inconvenient Truth. This film follows Al Gore, the former Democratic presidential candidate who started the movement to pull resources into battling what was then referred to as global warming. And in this film, you'll see Al Gore on a lecture circuit to raise public awareness of the dangers of global warming and call for immediate action to curb its destructive effects on the environment. It is interesting to note that Al Gore was on the board of some of the renewable energy companies and owned stock in those companies. How better to build your stock portfolio than to go on a lecture tour that raised public fear so greatly that the so-called green energy projects are embarked upon without proper oversight. Regardless, if they are cost-effective and most importantly not really knowing the true impact from this environmental projects on humanity and wildlife. So it's about an hour and 40 minutes of him spewing political propaganda. So that was when climate change was really introduced to the masses, Christine. And so when did New York first start looking into climate change?
So back in 2015, Andrew Cuomo, the New York governor at the time, and former Vice President Al Gore met at Columbia University for a climate leadership conference. Cuomo and Gore signed the Under 2 Memorandum of Understanding. The governor joined 42 other jurisdictions worldwide in a commitment to prevent the global average temperature from rising 2 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial average. That's the limit that the Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change had said is needed to curb the catastrophic climate-related events such as extreme weather, drought, and dramatic sea rise.
Okay, so moving forward from 2015 to 2018, after the governor had signed the Under 2 Memorandum of Understanding, why was 2018 a pivotal year for New York?
Well, prior to 2018, the Republicans and conservative Democrats had a coalition in the New York Senate that effectively stopped radical climate change legislation passing the Senate. In 2018, the Progressive Democrats won enough seats to control the Senate and the House. The consequences of the 2018 New York Senate elections were immediately felt because the Progressive Democrats held majorities in both houses. Democrats, having followed former Vice President Gore's views on climate change, were ready to take sweeping action, believing they were saving the planet. However, legislation was undertaken without a full understanding of the limits of renewable technology, making them prime targets for renewable energy salesmen who promised zero emissions with a redesign of the grid. What the progressives failed to realize is that carbon was not the only climate issue, and in pursuing the goal of zero emissions, the state's biodiversity would be threatened by massive projects reducing wildlife habitat.
So you said legislation was embarked upon. What key legislation was passed?
The Progressive Democrats fully supported the July 18th, 2019 Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, known as the Climate Act, that was signed into law by Andrew Cuomo. New York State's Climate Act is among the most ambitious climate laws in this nation and requires New York to reduce economy-wide greenhouse gases emissions by 40% by 2030 and no less than 85% by 2050 from 1990 levels.
So with these ambitious goals on their agenda that you just stated, how do they plan on accomplishing them?
To achieve these goals, the legislation requires the state power grid produce at least 9 gigawatts of offshore wind electric generation by 2035.
So I just want to quickly stop you right there just to explain what a gigawatt is. So a gigawatt is a unit of power, right, that is equal to 1 billion watts. And in general, a 15-watt LED bulb is sufficient for a room. So just repeat the last thing you said.
9 gigawatts of offshore wind electric generation by 2035, 6 gigawatts of disrupted photovoltaic solar generation by 2025.
And photovoltaic solar meaning a device that converts sunlight directly into electricity, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
3 gigawatts of statewide energy storage capacity by 2030, 185 trillion BTUs of end-use energy savings between 2025, energy use forecast, and BTUs stands for British Thermal Units, and simply used to determine the heating capacity or efficiency of HVAC systems and devices like furnaces, boilers, and pumps.
Okay. So what does this plan exactly mean for New York land use?
Coastline, lake, beachfront habitats would be forever changed by offshore wind. There is little understanding of the impact of these turbines would have on marine life and bird life. A wind company now applies to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for a permit for the estimated eagles the wind farm would kill. We are finding offshore wind is damaging the hearing of whales, leading once again to the possible extinction of this majestic species.
So do you have any statistics regarding the death of whales along the seaboard?
One statistic I read was that in 2018 alone, it is estimated that about 1,000 whales have died off the coast of the UK and Ireland, an area that has seen wind turbine development. In fact, there are an astonishing 2,590 wind turbines currently operating in the North Sea across 40 extensive wind farms. The problem is the turbines are all emitting low-level noise, which might be capable of affecting the navigation and communication of whales.
So you mentioned permits that companies must apply for when operating a wind farm. Do companies always apply for these permits?
Interesting you should ask. One high-profile case, the wind company NextEra pleaded guilty to 150 eagle deaths when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife filed a case against the company. Next, our spokesman, Steve Strangle, said the company didn't seek permits because it's believed the law didn't require them for unintentional bird deaths.
So they believed that they had special privileges that exempted them from filing any permits. Okay, wow. So what does the goal for solar energy mean for land use?
Thousands of acres will be needed to be cleared to house massive solar farms impacting wildlife and vulnerable farmland. Examples, Shoshari County has seen valuable farmland sacrificed to solar companies. There's going to be problems with this. The glass getting into the lands, cows grazing will be killed by ingesting this glass. Cobalt will be leaching into the soil. So farmers that were promised that once the solar farm was done, that they could have their land back and use it again, will find it unusable. And finally, fire risks from the panels, as well as from the best components attached to the panels, is of high importance.
So what does the 3 gigawatts of statewide energy storage capacity by 2030 mean for the state?
We are seeing the effects of this right now with a 116 megawatt storage system proposed in Mahopac and a 275 megawatt system proposed at Glenwood Landing, Long Island. Numerous small systems under a megawatt to 50 have been built across the state despite the fire risk.
So in my research, I also came upon a map of Staten Island that showed that the planned battery storage sites for the borough. So I just want to show that too. We're going to be showing a map of that. You're going to see how these sites span across the whole borough. It's very disturbing, in my opinion. So I just quickly want to show a map of the state, which depicts also the locations of existing energy storage capacity as well. So we'll be showing the Staten Island, the borough of Staten Island, where there's the proposed lithium battery storage facilities, as well as a map of the actual the state of New York. And like I said, that depicts all the locations of existing energy storage capacities. So let's get back to legislation. I hear that Governor Cuomo issued 94C as means to speed up the approval process for renewable energy companies.
That is right. On April 3rd, 2020, New York enacted the Accelerated Renewable Energy Growth and Community Benefits Act. The landmark environmental legislation, which included a new executive law, 94C. Executive Law 94C created the Office of Renewable Energy Siting, ORES, the nation's first state office specifically devoted to siting of large-scale renewable energy generating facilities.
Okay, so in other words, 94C paves the way for the RAPID Act to be passed under Governor Hochul's administration.
Yes, the Regulatory Accountability and Process Improvement Act, known as the RAPID Act, is a legislative initiative aimed at streamlining the regulatory process by putting the decision of approval in the hands of a single government agency. That would be the Office of Renewable Energy instead of the individual towns in the state.
Okay, so what has the RAPID Act meant for towns and villages in the state with renewable energy projects in regard to their planning boards?
It has meant that solar, wind, and BESS connected to renewable energy will now be fast-tracked for approval. Energy companies can now bypass the town and submit an application to ORES for approval, even over town objections.
So I just want to say right now for the Mahopac Somer lithium battery storage facility proposal, so right now we have a 6-month moratorium. So once the battery facility is connected to another a solar farm or a wind turbine, part of the BESS is when it's connected. All those efforts made by everyone in town, all the town council people, it doesn't mean anything, essentially. Mm-hmm. So all that's what we're getting to, right? So a local control is eliminated and it's just bypassed.
Yep.
So I just want to know. So it goes against the Article 9 of the New York Constitution that protects home rule, in which Article 9 is comprised of 3 sections, right? For the sake of time, the first section simply states that every local government must have a legislative body that is elected by the people. So I'll ask the question again. Does the Rapid Act contradict or even breach Article 9 of the New York Constitution?
So I would argue it does, but ultimately New York courts will decide on that point. In addition, the Rapid Act would also repeal Executive Law 94C, which establishes ORAs in its current form, and amend the Public Service Law to insert the substantive language of 94C. As part of this statutory change, the Rapid Act would establish Public Service Law Article 8, siting of renewable energy and electric transmission siting.
Okay. So what does that mean exactly? Could you simplify that?
Okay, the new Article 8 will govern the siting and permitting of both major renewable energy generation and major electric transmission facilities. So as the Rapid Act appears to maintain all the requirements of 94C, the siting process for major renewable energy generation projects will not change as a result of this legislation, but there will be significant changes to the manner in which the major electric transmission facilities are reviewed and siting. These major changes include establishing a 120-day period in which ORAs must issue a finding determining if the transmission facility application is complete, and where such deadline is not met, provide that the application will automatically be deemed complete. The completeness determination period for generation facilities will remain 60 days from application submission. So establishing uniform standards is another change they're making for the siting, design, and construction and operation of all transmission facilities, similar to what is currently done for generation facilities. It also would require ORAs to issue draft permit conditions within 60 days of completeness, determination for public comment. In effect, the state believes this will eliminate the lengthy time process that the Article 7 process had, where towns could have input and environmental agencies would have their say as well, and require permit decisions of transmission application to be made within 1 year of the date of the application was deemed complete, and no such decision is made automatically granting the permit in most cases, unless the portion of the facility is located on property where the applicant does not have an agreement with the landowner for the right-of-way, though the applicant and ORAs can agree to extend this deadline.
Okay. So what about BESS, which stands for, I don't know if we've broken it down, but Battery Energy Storage System, standalone facilities? That, in other words, is not connected at this point, like Mayapac's not connected at this point, to another component of renewable energy like EMF cables, wind turbine, or solar farm. So what does that mean for standalone facilities?
Despite the early rumors that the Rapid Act would cover the siting of large-scale standalone energy storage, jurisdiction over such projects was not included in the bill and therefore continues to be left in the hands of local municipalities.
Okay, so as of right now, BESS standalone facilities are still controlled by local municipalities. That brings me back to Senator Harcum. Do you think he tried to close the gap with Bill S-7834?
Definitely. He tried to close that gap with his bill S-7834. He claimed he was going to be involving local community by providing the expertise of ORAs and allowing them some input. But this was just the same sham that they did with the Rapid Act, that the community has some say, they can voice objections, and then ORAs rules against them.
Okay. So as mentioned before, the bill was stricken down due to the great backlash Harcum received from the community, including town supervisors across New York State. Also, I think he feared that his chance of being reelected this year may have been compromised. His true intentions and agenda had been revealed with this. And I just want to state once again, that this podcast endorses Gina Arena for New York State Senate of District 40. So this concludes part 1 of episode 2. How did New York become a state of mandates and unrealistic climate goals? And we want to thank you for watching our podcast, It's Not Easy Being Green.
And we'll also put up a map of District 40.
Yes. Thank you.